Great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Sokolov at the Compton Foundation, and I just really want to welcome you to this briefing, everyone in the room, everyone online. We are thrilled to be able to support a little bit of this cross-sector work. We really feel like both the resistance and the building of the next alternatives are critical things to be doing in this moment. And it takes roots, this group, bringing together 4 national alliances across 30 states, 150 groups, maybe more by now. Super exciting, and so we're thrilled to hear how you guys are thinking about this visionary opposition moment. I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Jen, and good morning, everybody. I'm Dawn Phillips with Right to the City Alliance, and I'm really honored, and it's a great pleasure to be in the room and online with everybody this morning. I think for some of you, it's probably closer to after lunch. So feel free to stretch your legs, get up, move your arms if it helps. We have about a 90-minute call this morning, and we're really excited that folks are going to be able to join. As Jen said, the goal and purpose for us this morning is to really kind of share the work that is coming together by the 4 alliances that have started to convene to work under this It Takes Roots banner. So on behalf of the Right to the City Alliance, Grassroots Global Justice, Climate Justice Alliance, and the Indigenous Environmental Network, we want to welcome you and thank you for being here this morning. So we have I think a really dynamic, exciting agenda this morning. The format is that we'll hear from 2 sets of folks on the panel, and here you see some of our great speakers who we're going to be hearing from very, very shortly. The idea is that the first panel will really kind of lift up, highlight the kind of lessons and the victories that we see from the first 100 days of organizing that we did. The reality is that our alliances, for the most part, have a history of working together. But the last 100 days, as Jen said, was really a time to kind of step up, increase, and attempt to make more strategic the way in which we were aligning, coordinating, and maximizing our impact. So the goal of the first panel is really to hear some of those lessons, hear some of those reflections from the local leaders, folks from our member organizations, folks on the ground. The second panel will be a little bit more of a more of a national perspective, looking at the kind of the strategic nature of what we're thinking about the future, how we're looking at what needs to happen, I think, post this 100 days, and kind of into a longer term perspective. So there will be a little bit of time for questions from folks both on Zoom and here in the room, and then we'll wrap up in time for folks to be out. So that's a little bit about kind of what we're looking at for our time together. And I want to for folks who are on Zoom and looking at the screen, Shah, if you would kind of go to the next slide. So what I want to do and where I want to start is just as a way to ground us is start with briefly recapping some of the efforts and the highlights of what we've done so far. So like I said, It Takes Roots is really a 4 alliance of alliances. It's partly a political exercise in how many times you can put the word alliance in a sentence. Seems to work. No, just kidding. So we are, our 4 alliances that have a history are, for our purposes, generally relatively high level of political alignment. The reality is we do actually work in different areas, anti-militarization, gentrification, displacement, climate resilience, indigenous sovereignty and protections. But the ideas of what we care about and where what we think needs to happen in this moment is actually highly aligned. And in coming together, we have also partnered with some key resource partners who are really kind of bringing their unique and particular strengths, capacities to our alliance, in particular Center for Story-Based Strategy, who's working with us on kind of narrative framing, messaging work, and the Ruckus Society, and Sharon's here, and you'll hear a lot more about the kind of ways in which they're helping develop the kind of direct action capacity of our folks on the ground. So next slide, please, Sha. So here's a little bit of a map of where the It Takes Roots membership as a whole is nationally. So as Jen was saying, it's 150 organizations in 30 states and tribal territories, nationwide and in Canada. And while we don't, as you see, we don't cover every state and we're not everywhere, we feel like the breadth of the, in terms of geographic, sectoral breadth, the kind of breadth of the alliance is meaningful. And we are excited, that through this formational collaboration, we are, to some extent, a collaboration of both rural and urban, national tribes and nations. So, we're covering a lot of territory, and we're trying to really kind of do this alignment across the geographies, across the sectors, and across the issue focus. So, Shah, if you would, the next slide, please. So here are just a few of the images from the organizing that we've done in the last 100 days. And, just to give you a concrete sense of what we've achieved, I mean, I think we kicked off the collaboration with two really powerful, in my opinion, two really powerful actions together, coming right out of the elections. I think like something like November 9th or 10th, right to the city and GGJ immediately began conversations about helping our sector really kind of analyze and figure out what was happening in this kind of new Trumpian moment, if you would. And so we hosted a 3-part post-election webinar series that had almost 900 people join, where we began to, gather our local leadership, our national and international allies to come together and really try to start to collectivize and build an analysis of what we think the moment represented, right? And it was the beginning of starting to figure out what next, what were the necessary responses, what people felt were going to be the things that we needed to do as a sector to be able to really kind of defend and expand to some extent our fights and our rights in this next period. So the webinar was really a key way of kind of like signaling the beginning of what has been this 100-day process for us. Then right around the same time, the Climate Justice Alliance and GGJ organized a delegation of 100 people of color around Thanksgiving to go and support the defense of Standing Rock with the Indigenous Environmental Network. And that was, what for us was the beginning and the kickoff of a set of collective mobilizations where we were bringing people together from across the country to kind of stand, defend, and take collective action together. And that was incredibly powerful. Shah, if you would, the next slide, please. And this, I don't know if the rest of you in the room are having a hard time seeing this. It's a little bit of a eyesight test for those of us who are in the room. It's fairly small, but what this slide is meant to show is that we had a plan, and we worked it. And if you want to actually see the words, please let us know. We happily send this to you so you can actually read it. But what we then continued to do was, we were everywhere. I think to some extent we were at the Women's March in DC. We were together at the Native Nations March in DC on March 7th to the 10th. And we had a kind of an arc of action starting April 27th and continuing all the way through May Day, where we organized both in DC and across the country a collective set of activities that included mobilizing over 200 people to the People's Climate March in DC to participate in actions to create what was being described as Earth's Red Line at the People's Climate March, and supporting over 25 actions across the country on May Day in partnership with the Movement for Black Lives, Mi Gente, Fight for 15, under what was the Beyond the Moment banner. So, you know, it's been a really intense and powerful 100 days for us. Shah, if you would, the next slide, please. It's been a really intense and powerful 100 days for us. And, you know, just to sum up kind of what the intention was, and I think what we feel like we're taking out of the work so far is like, you know, in the first 100 days, our goal and our intention was really to acknowledge that none of our individual alliances on our own are in a position really to respond adequately to this moment. This moment we are acknowledging is bigger than all of us and requires a response that is bigger than any of us individually. What we are leaning to and leaning on is what we think is our biggest strength, which is our strong local organizing, deep connections, accountabilities, and roots in local communities, and our kind of commitment to joint practice and joint alignment and struggle with each other. As you can imagine, it's actually not easy to organize across 4 alliances. And some of our speakers and some of our folks will start to address some of those nuances. But in short, it has been a powerful 100 days for us. And we're really actually excited to be here to give you all the kind of in-depth report about it and actually start to point and look to the future. So on that note, I want to start to introduce the folks who are going to join us on our first panel. We got 3 really, really great folks who we're gonna be hearing from right now. Melissa Miles from Ironbound Community Corporation in Newark, New Jersey. And just a few short words about Ironbound. So Ironbound actually played a big role in the People's Climate March mobilization in 2014 that happened in New York City. So I don't know how many of you remember that, but that was a huge mobilization, and our folks together, which is to say, Right to the City, CJA, GGJ forces, mobilize in force in that mobilization. And Ironbound was one of the key anchor organizations to help make that possible. So Melissa, thank you for being with us this morning. Melissa's also going to be kind of leading and facilitating the next part of the program. But we're really excited and honored to be joined by Melissa today from Ironbound. We're also going to hear from Huey Ong, and Huey joins us from Oregon, where he's the director of OPAL Environmental Justice Oregon. And some of you probably know OPAL well, but OPAL is actually the newest member of Grassroots Global Justice Alliance. And they're doing a lot of work building out the just transition strategy and framework in their region. And we're going to hear Huey talk some about that. And last but not least, we're going to hear from Claude Copeland. And Claude's with Iraq Veterans Against the War in New York, based out of New York City. And you know, folks probably know, but the veterans have been organizing a tremendous solidarity and powerful action with folks at Standing Rock and you know, being highly engaged and leading some of the work nationally around anti-militarization. So good morning to Melissa, Huey, and Claude. Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. So folks, I'm gonna start and just ask each of you, starting with Melissa, then Huey, and then Claude, to just briefly take a moment and answer for us, you know, why did you feel your organization, why did your organization feel like it was important in this moment to get involved and engage in It Takes Roots? You know, most of you are, you know, deeply engaged in local organizing and local work, and many of us know that oftentimes the national work feels like a pull away from the local work. Why in this moment was this type of a national collaboration and effort so important for your organization. So Melissa, maybe we can start with you, and then we'll go to Huey, and we'll hear from Claude last. So.
Sure. Thanks so much, Dawn. Okay. Great. So it's exactly what you said. You know, we are a base building organization in Newark, so that's our focus. But, you know, our communities are under threat like they've never been before. You know, we're seeing threats on multiple fronts. And in moments like this, you know, we acknowledge that, you know, coming together is one of the best strategies to protect ourselves and defend our communities. So, you know, right now, this is a moment where we have to think bigger than ever, where intersectionality as well as solidarity are really more than ever necessary in our work. And so, you know, seeing that and understanding that meant that we had to show up. You know, it was our prerogative to show up, and in a strong way. And so, you know, we've really been mobilizing our community with the help of this alliance with It Takes Roots, you know, to stand up right now and show solidarity with communities around the nation and around the world, because more than ever, you know, we're under attack from capitalist, imperialist forces that, you know, really threaten the livelihoods and lives, really, of many people in our community.
Thank you, Melissa. Huey?
As we're coming together, can you all hear me now? When I learned about these 4 alliances coming together, I felt that there's no way we could not be involved. They are led by brilliant people that have been driven, long-standing, values-based organizing and power building. So absolutely, we saw this as a movement opportunity. You know, when we saw that there was a call for a PCM, while OPAL is anchoring a statewide just transition alliance with other frontline community base building organizations, we saw this as an opportunity to really lift those voices up. We had longstanding relationships with, you know, Portland's Mayday Coalition, as well as existing relationships with mainstream white environmental organizations. And we took on that responsibility to actually test those white allied organizations in this particular moment in supporting frontline POC-led communities. You know, we needed a broader progressive community in Oregon to be exposed to the decades of work led by frontline communities. And this was one of those opportunities to actually draw out the intersections and actually connect it also to the International History of Worker Immigrant Solidarity on May Day. We had an all POC program where speakers drawing links to food security, immigrant and migrant rights, housing, transportation, workers' rights, militarization, both locally and abroad. And we actually mobilized a 3,500 person march and rally that actually specifically had stops on landmarks in Portland that symbolizes some of those intersections. An example is one of those sites is an $11 million new transit police station and its dedicated location. All of this was to demonstrate that we must build out a long-term strategy and that frontline communities need to be centered with real power. The mainstream orgs showed up well. The test kind of worked. We pushed leaders to challenge their own members, and they did. We challenged them to raise resources for the PCM and the Oregon Just Transition Alliance, and they did. We raised over $18,000 to actually help launch our initiative statewide. So over the next several months, you know, the relationships we built over this time doing this work together, engaging both frontline communities and mainstream allied organizations, we will be finding opportunities to break bread together where member-to-member engagement happens, where we can deepen our understanding of each other's work, and also to broaden and deepen our analysis. It's actually very, very super exciting time for us going forward.
Great, thank you, Huey. Claude?
Yeah, so for us at Iraq Veterans Against the War, we were excited to take part. One, because as a membership-based organization, we have our members, you know, posted up nationwide. So we were able to get some folks from the Midwest, down south, and even coast to come together and really see representation of not only issues, but also just communities from, you know, similar areas. And and being a member of Grassroots Global Justice Alliance has really helped us to refine our own understanding of how militarism is connecting with our issues, and seeing that Roots was bringing in other alliances, you know, that could also help us and like consider like where our work is right to be able to expand, especially considering how militarism affects the local community within our indigenous populations, communities of color, and low to mid folks. It was just really good to hear those other voices and just really start to build together.
Cool. Thank you, Clark. So, Huey, I wanted to go back to you for a second and, you know, ask you a follow-up. So you talked about the way in which the local organizing process has really kind of like strengthened movement building work. Are there any other kind of either lessons or particular reflections or challenges from the moment that you have that you think you would add to what you just put out?
I guess one of the challenges is having one of the movement organizing that's happening in Oregon feeling very stretched, both with resources and capacity to find an additional moment to build out this new alliance and deepening a vision for what a just transition could look like in the state of Oregon, and actually providing resources for those organizations. So we're doing that and leveraging our relationships to do so. I think, you know, having, you know, mainstream organizations actually take on some of that responsibility within their own membership and actually engaging their folks to weigh in financially to support frontline communities has been one of the key lessons, where, you know, our folks aren't stretching ourselves too thin to try to, or thinner, to try to do that additional resource generating, right? Where we're actually asking others that have the ability to leverage their relationships from mainstream organizations to weigh in. I think that was actually very positive for us, and, you know, it really is holding them accountable to some of the values we, you know, they've shared through this process.
Great, thank you, Huey. Melissa, if I could ask you, could you speak a little bit to how you think this kind of like national cross-sector alignment will strengthen Ironbound's local organizing work? So, you know, what from you all's perspective to some of the points that Huey was putting out, what are you seeing in terms of how this will help the local work?
Well, speaking from the eye, you know, as an organizer, my experience with the movement basically has allowed me to really see how many other communities are dealing with similar issues. So, for example, you know, I was able to network and meet folks from, you know, Indigenous young people, and that had an enormous impact on the way that I organize in my own community. Also, you know, we have such a wide variety of issues that are happening on the ground, from deportation to, you know, dislocation to, you know, police brutality. And so, you know, to be able to connect with other organizers from organizations that are dealing with those same problems really expanded my ability to be able to organize on the ground. I mean, honestly, it was priceless for me. And also to be able to come back to my, you know, to the rest of the staff and share that learning with them, I think was really crucial for us, particularly in this moment where, you know, these threats are national and international. You know, I really feel that it was very important that we also, you know, have a lens that is national. And so, you know, through our alliances, we were able to gain what we might not be able to gain on our own.
Great, thank you, Melissa. And Claude, you're gonna get the last response. Claude, maybe you can say a little bit from you all's perspective, what you think the biggest victory or the biggest advance or the, you know, the biggest achievement of this last phase of organizing has been in terms of connecting you all's work to this kind of broader national context.
Well, for us, I think a victory was connecting more with the various organizations that were part of the delegation, and also to be able to invite or in gaining the understanding of like the resistance hubs that the It Takes Root coalition is working to develop. One of the things we saw that we wanted to invite more folks to is we're looking to have a non-violent direct action camp coming at the end of this month. And I think that really helped us to frame like, look further at like the different tracks that we're having that's with the help of Ruckus Society, and having veteran and non-veterans participants to be able to learn and like skill share with each other. Just looking, and I know you'd mentioned it before, but like being inspired from our participation in Standing Rock, we saw where our skills were helpful, but we want to, train up on other skills to family has that we demilitarized while in our service, but learn how to be better activists, and also pass on whatever skills that were helpful at the time to other, to those who have already been doing the work, and and just come together and see like what we can vision out going forward. So really being able to get further invested into the different areas of work everyone's being a part of now.
Great. Thank you so much, Clark. Folks, that kind of is a little bit of the perspective from kind of the local frontline groups in terms of the work of the last period. I just got an important breaking message from my colleagues that I correct the incorrect number that I put out. We had more like 1,500 folks in DC for PCM. I think earlier I said 200, so it's closer to 1,500. So I think that's a worthwhile correction. So please make a note of that in your notes. I'll give everybody 10 seconds to change your numbers. And while we do that, I'm going to hand over to Melissa, who's actually going to take us through the next piece of the program. So Melissa, over to you.
Thank you, Dawn. So I think we heard a lot of valuable perspective, and we're going to continue with that. So we're going to hear from a few more speakers now. We're going to hear from Cindy Weisner of Grassroots Global Justice in Miami, Florida. Grassroots Global Justice Alliance. We'll hear from Sharon Lungo from the Ruckus Society out of Oakland, California. We'll also hear from Candy Mossett from the Indigenous Environmental Network in North Dakota. And we'll hear from Anna from the Climate Justice Alliance in Washington, D.C. So all four of these women have really been holding down a very powerful front, really opening space for organizations like mine to be able to do work on a national level. So I'm going to pose a few questions, and then we'll go one by one. And, I'd like to hear from you all about, what particular contributions you think it takes groups to make to the visionary organizing happening across many sectors. And then also, of course, the big question is, what can we expect to see next? So we'll start with Cindy. In your role as National Coordinator of Grassroots Global Justice Alliance, you've done some great work to bridge sectors and ensure that there's conversation across those sectors, that we're organizing around. So, different groups and movements, including the movement for Black Lives, have been able to be integrated into this important climate justice work. You were recently heard saying that the next phase is the time when we need to begin, quote, planting the seeds of our vision. So could you talk a little bit about that vision? What are you all bringing to the It Takes Roots and the visionary organizing, and then where can we expect to see this moving, in your opinion?
All right, thank you, Melissa, and hello, saludos to everybody. So we are living in pretty tumultuous times, and we're very excited about the work that's happened for many years, but in particular these past 6 months with the 4 alliances. And we hosted here in Miami the evaluation, but more importantly, the kind of path forward for It Takes Roots. And one of the exciting things is we're doing deep evaluation with the member organizations. We're doing deliberation within our own steering committees and coordinating committees, but we're also trying to make projections for this next period and really thinking about our work in the next year and a half, and what do we do with keep building the momentum. And so one of the ideas is that a year from now, we want to plan an It Takes Roots convention and utilize this year to really weave and build our platforms and consolidate solutions and political alignment. We have been very clear from day one that this moment has been about visionary opposition, where we are clear that we have to defend and protect, but we also want to be solutionaries. And we've been hearing from our members the need for training and capacity building in a local context, but also in a regional context. And we need to keep building our infrastructure around organizing and really taking this idea of the resistance hub to a municipal power building hub, and where we begin to really think about governance, power, reclaiming democracy from the grassroots, as people of color, as Indigenous people, as white working class folks. So one of the goals for this next year, there's been a lot of benefit for us to talk about this deliberately within It Takes Roots, but also with our allies at Beyond the Moment as joint practice, right? That this is a moment of really coming together around joint strategic practice with each other, and then joint tactical practice with each other. And we want to be able to, in this next phase, continue evaluating where our collective membership is strong, where there's potential to continue doing that joint work and collaboration, and facilitating where our members across alliances and across sectors meet with each other, and being able to have each other orient each other to each other's works, frameworks, as you heard Melissa say. It's this cross-pollination being very key and important. Goal number 2 is really about supporting place-based power building strategy and continuing to develop that capacity of people of color, women, gender non-conforming led organizations. And we've heard loud and clear from so many of our member groups about building the capacity and strategy around nonviolent, creative, direct action, around political education and the need for curriculum, and being able to share curriculum and create resource toolboxes and really utilizing a way to train the trainers. So that is our goal number 2, and laying out this plan in this next year and year and a half, how to keep building that capacity and almost being able to adopt it to what people need on a local and place-based basis. Goal number 3 is about, really connecting our work from the local, tribal, municipal level to this larger shared political vision. And so part of what we want to be able to do is how do we use this time, using technology, using case studies, model sharing, learn from what's happening, for example, in Jackson, Mississippi, with the election of a very progressive left candidate for mayor, learn from the Bay Area resistance model, where they've been able to really capture and absorb a lot of the new momentum, be able to talk about and do deeper analysis of the Freedom Cities hate-free zones and the expanded sanctuary campaigns being led by Beyond the Movement. And so part of that is how do we continue to build on that bigger political vision and then strengthen our capacity of our particular sector to do rapid response and community defense. And that's one thing that's really key and important, that we know we're still going to be needing to more than ever defend and protect, but also begin to cross-share. The last goal is about building our capacity as the grassroots organizing sector towards our biggest vision and really think about this national vehicle of social movement forces. And we are exploring this joint national convention of the 4 alliances in May 2018, and really utilizing this year very intentionally to do that work on a local, regional level, getting our organizers out into the communities like fish in the water, and being able to support and do training, and more importantly, weave the platform. Because one of the things that's been very clear is for the last decade or more, we've been working on solutions. We've been working on the alternatives. And so part of that is how do we then cross-pollinate and bring together in a platform this just transition out of the fossil fuel economy, land and housing rights, indigenous sovereignty, grassroots feminism, demilitarization at home and abroad, expanded sanctuary, divestment and reinvestments. And part of that idea is to be able to lift up our best thinking at this moment and what does that look like, and convene people 6 months prior to the midterm elections and begin to articulate how do resistance hubs begin to implement a municipal power building strategy. And that all ultimately our objective is how do we pair up this electoral process with a platform that we name to hold candidates and to run our own candidates with this platform. And I think that's a very exciting moment that we've now got into. We have to continue doing the process within our own alliances to sort of do a final okay on this. But I think this is kind of the visionary opposition and the momentum that we're trying to build. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Ooh, Melissa, my dear.
Okay?
Yeah, there's a big echo, my dear. Hey, Melissa, can't hear you.
Okay, there we go. Thank you so much, Cindy. So appreciated. That was a great explanation of the work that y'all are doing and adding on to this. You mentioned a few points that will take us into our next speaker, particularly, rapid response, building capacity, training and sharing. And, on that, I want to turn it over to Sharon Lungo of the Ruckus Society, just speaking about nonviolent direct action and how that's really come into high demand since the elections. And myself, as a part of the J20 mobilization, was able to see Ruckus Society in action. And I was so impressed with the way that you all, jumped right in and commanded the space, and at the same time trained so many people, and really made a commitment to continue to train people and organizations going out. So Sharon, maybe you could talk a little bit more about what Ruckus Society has done, as part of this 100-day strategy, and what we can see from you all moving forward.
Cool. Well, thanks, Melissa. And hi, everybody. Okay, echo's gone. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about Ruckus and our approach to the It Takes Roots Alliance, and then what's coming down the pike for us. So Ruckus is a 21-year-old organization. We're led by women of color. We count on a multiracial volunteer network of action practitioners of 150 that grows every time we do a training. We do training and action. We're a training and action organization with an emphasis on capacity building. So we believe in leaving skills and strategy behind in the communities that we work on. This manifests as local training work that includes training staff as well as membership, so that staff can orient membership and support members in becoming action leaders. It looks like direct action training camps. So we heard Claude from IVAW mention a camp that we're doing in partnership with them over the Memorial Day weekend. And I'll talk in a second a little bit more about an It Takes Roots camp that's going to happen later this summer. It looks like regional skills trainings, training for trainers, and it looks like what we like to say is throwing down in the streets, right? So the photos that you saw earlier of the work that It Takes Roots Alliance is doing, and then I think in a second, Shaw will throw up slide. So, you know, what you don't see there is a team of Ruckus trainers that works from the jump to support communities in the action design process, the action planning process, and also the execution of the work on the streets, right? So you don't see the team that's running around like crazy, you know, filling the balloons and assembling the balloon banners that I was told, like, running for an hour down the street to try to catch our folks in the Women's March. So that's a little bit of what we do kind of behind the scenes, right? We've developed and distributed free curriculum and training manuals since the jump, so for over 25 years, over 21 years. We emphasize smart tactics, but also creative resistance. So we believe in centering art and creativity in all of the action design work that we do as a powerful way to relay our message to the world. We stand to support the front lines and the most impacted communities by providing training, but also accompanying communities and developing tactics that meet their campaigns, that build power, but that are also appropriate for their communities, appropriate for the cultural context that people come from, and appropriate for the risk level that people want to engage in and take. Ruckus is a founding member of the Climate Justice Alliance. We're a member of the Grassroots Global Justice Alliance. We're a partner of IEN through our IP3 program. The IP3 program is a 12-year-old program that Ruckus has been incubating, which has been focused on capacity building specifically in Indigenous communities. IP3 is about to birth its own organization, which we're really excited and really proud to announce that we've been able to incubate this project, and now it's going to launch its own organization in Indian country. And we're also a member, obviously, of the It Takes Roots Alliance. We enjoy longstanding trusted relationships in communities across the US, Canada, but we've also been called into the international arena to support work there. Our legacy spans from the early days of forest defense to the WTO in Seattle, so blocking deportation buses, to most recently the People's Climate March. So we're kind of everywhere. So what's coming up? So, you know, the It Takes Roots Alliance, our partners, we're all testing our skills and our strategy on the streets right now. Leveraging our power at home as well as taking our demands nationally, right? So we've seen some really powerful examples of national actions and taking our demands to the national stage. Locally, through the work of the Resistance Hub, so I think Cindy mentioned a little bit about that, we're increasing the capacity of our communities to take action as well as building their capacity to train each other, right? So capacity building being a really important part of this work. Each hub is going to go through its own tailoring process to translate terms and skills in ways that are culturally relevant and appropriate for their base, and will include what we call action apprenticeships. So this is where staff or community members pick up skills in action, rolling alongside of our teams in direct action and getting to try out new action roles and, you know, kind of getting familiar with different possibilities on the streets. We're going to see more national interventions, more direct actions, because when we take action and our demands to the streets, you know, we give our allies an opportunity and we give them the direction that they need in order to support frontline fights, right? We need their support not just in the organizing world, but we actually need it on the streets with us as well. And we also teach them how to leverage their own privilege and push our fights a step further, right? So when we talk about communities that can't take the level of risk that some of us can take, this is one way we can leverage the power of our allies and giving them really specific direction. So we're also going to see a national action camp. In addition to the camp that we're doing with IBAW in the late summer, we're going to host a national action camp. It Takes Roots is a partner, and the Miente Alliance is also a partner in this camp. Ruckus camps, they're kind of our flagship program. They're 5-day intensive direct action trainings. This round will train about 80 frontline grassroots activists in action skills from climbing to creative resistance to blockades to action strategy. This camp will also include a cross-sectional cut of our movement allies as well, so that we can share strategy, vision, and experience with each other, right? So we don't believe in training ourselves in a vacuum, but bringing other people into our spaces to be able to have hard conversations, to talk about how things manifest on the streets, and to just get people out of the city and out of their element, you know, into direct action spaces and getting them excited. And it's really fun. And you're going to see a lot more trust building, right? Taking action together builds trust. It doesn't just build our power, but it actually builds trust. I've seen, you know, personally, not just over the last 100 days, but in the history of these alliances, our communities come together in a much stronger way by taking direct action together on the streets, you know, by putting ourselves out there, and our work becomes that much more aligned, you know, when we come out of it. So why build direct action skills? Because nowadays people are galvanized like no other time we've seen, right? People are looking for meaningful ways to take direct action, and we are the people to provide that meaning and that pathway forward. We're in a moment where we're testing what we can actually do on the streets, right? We're seeing a lot of increased repression. We're seeing laws that are legalizing vigilantism against, protesters and activists on the streets. And that means it's that much more important for us to visibilize our resistance, especially as grassroots people of color, especially as Indigenous people and all the communities that we represent. We say that in moments like these, people don't always rise to their highest level of self, but they rise to their highest level of training, right? And so we need to train people in de-escalation. We need to train people in the skills and the roles that are necessary to hold these powerful actions down on the street. We're going to see more frontline impacted communities, Indigenous people of color, and working class communities taking leadership together in direct action. I'd say one of the lessons that came out of Standing Rock is not just that non-community members need to know how to take direction from a local impacted community, but that community itself needs to be empowered with skills, strategy, and the space to design direct action campaigns that meet their needs in the long term. Right, so really focusing that power in on our communities.
That is awesome. And if I can pause you
that's one of
right
the
there,
Sharon. We talked about Beyond the Moment and leveraging our power on behalf of Black lives. We've talked about deportations in the Mi Gente Alliance and leveraging our power on their behalf. And I really think It Takes Roots is building a legacy of cross-sector action. Almost done. And as It Takes Roots, we're leveraging that action power to highlight the multiple plights that our communities face, right? So everything from police brutality to gentrification to deportations to the climate crisis. Visionary and solutionary action is needed now more than ever, and we're the ones with the solutions, and we're the ones that are going to take that to the streets. I just want to close with one of Ruckus's favorite quotes from Frederick Douglass. You'll find it on the back of our t-shirt. It says, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will." It Takes Roots Alliance. We have the demands, we have the vision, we have the solutions. We're going to take it to the streets, and we'll see you there.
Thank you so much, Sharon. And, right towards the end of your presentation, you were speaking about, the protests and the direct actions around the pipelines. And so that would, bring us right into speaking with Candy Mossett from the Indigenous Environmental Network out in North Dakota. And, Sharon, you talked about, incubating projects, resistance hubs, increasing capacity, and the power of direct action, both on the front lines as well as nationally. And I think, Candy, you can definitely speak to all of those areas. Can you tell us, a little bit about what you all have done in this, 100 days plus, as part of the It Takes Roots, and where do you see these direct actions on the front lines and nationally going for you all?
Sure. So first of all, hello everybody. Good to see you all over the computer. I love this, not having to get on a plane and travel somewhere. So thank you for this opportunity, and thank you to everybody that's there in the room, sitting there. Sorry I couldn't be there with you today, but like I said, I work with the Indigenous Environmental Network. I've been a part of the network since 2007, but we have been around since 1990, so 27 years this year, kind of building off the American Indian movement and the different things that sort of didn't work in that movement and how we can continue to educate. I just start getting some wicked feedback. We good still? Okay. So basically, IEN, we have a shared mission within our network, which is to protect the sacredness of our Mother Earth. And it's from contamination and exploitation. And we do that by respecting and adhering to Indigenous knowledge and natural law. And that's kind of a lot for people to sometimes wrap their mind around. And so the work we've been doing has been 500 years or so, you know, of trying to talk about what natural law really is and how it's not just for specifically Indigenous peoples. It's how we as people, as humanity on the planet are connected. And that's the strength that we've seen through the It Takes Roots movement and through our gathering and our collaborations, is that we are all in these moments together. Even though we look at different organizing pieces that we do, we actually have this common goal, which is to, you know, in our lifetimes and in our frames, have our children have clean air and water, you know, be able to have a planet that's livable. And I've been thinking about this as we talked about coming to this meeting today. And what I really thought about was it comes back down to respect. I think what we're teaching ourselves and each other is respect that has been lost. Respect for ourselves and respect for that natural law, which we used to, a long time ago, pray for every single thing, and that was every person. You would put out tobacco, you would you know, if you killed an animal, you would pray for that animal, and you would say, thank you for allowing me this life to continue. Respecting the water, respecting everything. I think Standing Rock helped people to see sort of that larger ceremonial piece, but then it also helped us to see we're not alone in the movement. There's so much going on out in the world in all these communities, and we've been able to see how we can work together, not as rural communities or as urban communities, but how we do it together. It might look a little different where we are, but we all have that same end goal, which, I mean, if you think about it in reality, ultimately what we're fighting to do is save ourselves. You know, it's like humanity's on this crash course, and it's something that we've been talking about. So through our lens, we're looking at, you know, decolonization, you know, the colonization handbook that exists, which, you know, looking at how are we going to defend, protect, and renew. And it's something that popped up in Paris. You know, we had all these beautiful defend the sacred, you see? And using visuals and having our people come together. And what we've seen is that our Indigenous communities, our youth, man, this looks like mind blown as a result of the collaboration that we have as a network together, because we felt really isolated in a lot of our communities in the past. And now we see that that isolation is not real. We are actually fighting many of the same struggles, and we are much stronger together. So we do our Protecting Mother Earth gatherings with the Indigenous Environmental Network. We have one coming up this year in September. It's actually September 27th, which is the latest we've ever done it, but the community there that's when they're available, and we go based on what the community needs and wants to see. So that'll be in the Pacific Northwest, working with our brothers and sisters on the struggles and issues they've been having there. And I think that it'll be great because we're going to have panels that already talk about building our cross-sector movement. There's a multiracial movement building track, for example, that's going to happen at a Protecting Mother Earth gathering this year. And it's all camping. It's all getting on the land. Sharon kind of touched on that, where it's getting back to our roots. So it's exciting that we're collaborating together. And I just want to end, because I could probably talk for about an hour and a half. I know we all could, on the work we do, and that's how amazing it is. But it's also really difficult. It's really difficult to pull all these folks together from all these areas if we don't have the resources to support us. And that's something that jams us up time and time again. We want to talk about the qualitative building that we do versus the quantitative building that's done. It's not how many people can you jam on a bus and get somewhere. It's how are we qualitatively building that base with our people within our movement. And so we need the numbers, but we need to build a really strong foundation that doesn't have any cracks. And that's what we're doing as It Takes Roots. And it's really beautiful to see how far we've come. I would end with a quote inspired by Chief Sitting Bull, who inspired a lot of people, especially at Standing Rock, which is, as individual fingers, we can easily be broken, but together we make a mighty fist. And that is It Takes Roots right here. We're not ever going to easily be broken, and it's only going to grow stronger with the support of all the people in the room. So, Matsigirats, thank you.
Hey, Melissa, my dear, we can't hear you.
I was like, oh, should I keep talking?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, I was just, thank you so much, Kenny. That was really beautiful, really beautifully put. And some of the themes that I heard you talking about are, responding to what communities need, as well as building a cross-sector movement, and in that way, getting back to our roots. And, we heard you talk about the difficulty of pulling folks together, but how important it is to do that kind of work and build a strong foundation as part of this visionary opposition. And so with that, I'd like to bring us to our next speaker, Angela Drar from the Climate Justice Alliance out of Washington, D.C. Angela, as we know, is pretty new to the role. She's been in it for less than a year and just came in heart blazing, just, feet to the ground, already running for us. And, and I think that, she can definitely speak to all of these themes that we've been hearing so far, and how It Takes Roots is really going to be anchoring and leading the visionary opposition in this age and where we're going next. So, Angela, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, everyone. We might need to maybe mute. This is both Melissa and I are at the same meeting, so you might see her over here, which is a little trippy. But I think we might have to mute your phone so that we could be able to talk. Maybe I'll just mute. Can you all hear okay without the background noise? Dawn, can you do a little sound check? Is that
yeah, Angela, that works.
Well, I do want to say that coming in new to It Takes Roots, the history of It Takes Roots precedes itself. I think It Takes Roots came out, from the beginning, not only in these last 100 days, it's felt like 10 years, but more from the time when it organized in 2014 for the PCM and again in Paris for the climate COPs. And all of that common practice has led to us developing this It Takes Roots moment that is responsive and providing a common framing, the shared tools that are needed, the cross-sector movement building that's been so inspirational to groups and the people that have come out to support both the national and trans-local actions that we've been participating in the last 100 days. The intention that we have focused on to create impact throughout these last 100 days is based on what Candy said. It's the 500 years of being in a defensive and protective stance for communities, for the land, for water, for homes, and being able to work in that way, building that power has been something we want to continue to amplify in phase 4 of our work. For the PCM alone, we were able to mobilize and set the front lines in the sight and minds, framing it in the media during that march, but we also had a whole week of actions that amplified that work, and Dawn talked about at the very beginning. The day of the march alone, that morning was so inspirational. We began with the Indigenous leadership holding space for the water ceremony, and we mobilized hundreds of organizers to then mobilize thousands of people on the ground in DC, but across the nation. So we had something like 366, over 350 sister marches across the country. And the most significant part of that work, I think, for the Climate Justice Alliance, who's rooted in addressing climate change through root remedies, right? So we understand that carbon is important, but also we need to have solutions to climate change that don't continue to concentrate wealth and power, that allow us to have both human rights and the rights of Mother Earth in the solutions that we provide. And so being able to convey that the day of the march was incredibly inspirational, not only to those of us within It Takes Roots, but the communities that were around the country supporting our work in DC, and who later, just the next day, turned around in 20-something cities to then mobilize for May Day, because we don't have the privilege or the choice to not do that. And so phase 4 for us, as we look at what's next, is not only about what It Takes Roots is doing, it's phase 4 for all of us, right? We've come onto this call as grassroots groups, as funders, to say, really, what did we learn? What was the impact of these last 100 days? And we know that there's serious and mounting threats in communities across the nation, and that hasn't stopped when the 100 days were over. If anything, they're amplifying. But what is new is this national dialogue on intersectionality and solidarity. But we need that to really mean something, to really change lives. And so we have this need to support the energy to movement build in an intersectional way. And Cindy talked about this vision of really doing maybe a convention, a convening that could gather all of our communities together over these 150 groups and growing. A lot of us are growing our membership in this moment. And so we want to be able to convey the fact that we're not only standing on the streets and fighting back, but we're also building the new. And we want to be able to respond not only after these 100 days or for 2018 after the Senate races or for 2020 when Trump is, been pulled away from the power that he, wasn't deserving of in the beginning. But what is it that we're cultivating on the ground for groups who have been fighting for so long this bad and will continue to so what are we building there and positioning there? And this part of phase 4 for us and this evaluation and this exploration is that opportunity to do that, but to do it from a local perspective through the resistance hubs, through this position that Pam Tali so beautifully and eloquently talked about at the PCM rally, for all of us to be solutionaries. And I think that extends to funders and the work that you all have been doing. So I'm inspired and grateful that Jen has offered her space here. I see Tyler and Sarah and Andrew and other funders who have been so inspirational in your own sector and philanthropy to push and be bold, to take risks, to build together, to movement build in your own way that then allows us to take risks together and to push where we're needed to. And I know we're kind of tight on time and I want us to be able to answer a couple questions, but I really encourage you to reach out to Jen, who's in the room, to Don, to Shah, who's helped us organize this, and schedule one-on-ones to talk more about the details of what we're laying and planning for the future. And we thank you for exploring this moment with us.
Cool. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Candy. So, folks, we're getting close to time. We were hoping to leave a little bit of an opportunity to see if there were questions. It looks like the folks who are online don't yet have any questions. So I want to give folks who are in the room an opportunity. If you have a burning question, we probably can take one and still get you out on time. So, are there any kind of burning questions from folks in the room and or online? Now's your chance.
I don't even take the only. I really am interested in. Thank you so much for all of the work, for the commitment, for the movement, for the tireless effort, and it's an honor to be here with you all. My question is about how you would like funders to structure funding for the Alliance of Alliances, and what would help build movement, what actions and what approach on behalf of people in philanthropy would feel like it is adding value and building the movement and not sowing increased competition or accidentally undermining this Alliance of Alliances.
Thank you, Kat. Cindy and Angela, maybe between the three of us, we can take little pieces of that and, offer some different perspective. I'll start and then Cindy, I'll have you add to what I've said, and then Angela, you should add to what Cindy said, and that might take us to the end of time. So Kat, thank you. That's a really, that's a really thoughtful question. I think some of what I would say is, I think the reality is that, we are working on some of the kind of formational and structural questions about how to get the money. There's really resources that are needed on several levels. So as has been stated, there's a need for resources at the national level to support the coordination between the alliances. So far, we have essentially, to some extent, pulled capacity away from our internal programmatic work in order to resource and make It Takes Roots possible. So we have not, in the first 100 days, we were not able to raise the level of resources that allowed us to staff up to meet the kind of vision of alignment, of coordination. We struggled to do simple and complex things. Simple things like schedule meetings amongst ourselves took a long time, was very complicated. Who would do that work? And then complex things like we mobilized, as you saw, over 100 days on multiple occasions, very logistically complex, very expensive. We brought a lot of people together. We traveled and supported a lot of people who for whom that's a reach and a stretch to be able to travel and do these kinds of actions. So at the national level, there's a tremendous need to build out the collective infrastructure that would allow us to actually function as a collaborative. Then there is a tremendous need to resource our capacity partners, like Center for Story-Based Strategy and Ruckus, right? Who, like us, are also kind of doing work and providing services and capacity that there are no resources for. So some of what's been described was resourced, and then a lot of the work that CSS and Ruckus did actually was in kind, like the rest of us. So our partners need resourcing. Then this is the last point I'll make, and then Cindy and Angela will add. And then there's a tremendous need for resources on the ground. As you all know, the vision and the really what's our strength of our formational forces is that we are rooted in local communities. So the local organizations are in the same position as the National Alliance to some extent. So the first 100 days, we heard a lot from our folks on the ground who said, look, we are totally down. We are in. Folks are like, yes, the collaboration makes sense. The vision makes sense. The program makes sense. But without resources, it does feel like a pull away from, right? So people too many times were feeling like, do we mobilize for May 1st locally, or do we go to DC to be part of the week of action from PCM to May 1st? And it shouldn't be a choice. As Sharon and Angela said really clearly, this work is not an option. Intellectually and politically, we're clear both have to happen, but the reality is that the resources are a real issue. So Cindy, I'm gonna hand over to you to add on and build on that, Cindy.
I'm passing it to Angela. Another question came that
Sounds
I
good.
will.
Okay.
Right.
So Angela.
Yes, we're just monitoring the chat, and there seems to be some interesting questions popping up. And I guess, Dawn, I think you definitely mentioned, you brought it down and made it really operational. I think more in a macro level, as we're building, as we say, we're building the roots, but we're also trying to build an intersectional relationship, if you will, with philanthropy. And a lot of our groups are learning how to do that together. So to respond to your question, the earlier part of the question, because I think Don did a really great job of like operationalizing how we can actually fund and where the gaps and needs are. From my understanding, philanthropy is, entering into all of these different kinds of like evolving infrastructures or structures, right? That's led to the resistance funds, to the emerging grassroots funds that are building new ways. I think that even philanthropy is working with each other. Areas that we've seen really useful is, and that's, wanted to introduce you to Holly, who's in the room with you all, but also to folks on the call. We realize that we need to have better communication with philanthropy, and vice versa. Philanthropy needs to have better communication directly with the grassroots. And so oftentimes we're coming from the right intention in the right place, but as we manifest that work, that's where we're finding some areas of, wow, if we would have had a conversation before, we could have really informed that space. And PCM was part of learning that, but I think there's also spaces where funders in the room have actually reached out to CJA or GGJ or other groups who have had historical movement building experience. And so my recommendation, to make it short, is if you all are thinking about doing something like this, not that you have to consult with the grassroots to do it, but it is valuable to be able to share where the learning is happening together. And so, you know, oftentimes we're on some of the board meetings, some of the calls. We try to really share some of that knowledge together. And so we want to, as it takes roots, because the capacity and the knowledge on the ground is larger, want to extend that invitation as well.
Thank you, Angela. So I'm gonna read a question from some of our online participants, and then Laura, I see you have one. Let's try to get that. Your question might end up being for us in the room who are left. So there is a question about what organizations, oh, I'm sorry. So Cindy, you're gonna take this question. Talk a little bit about what kind of connections we, as It Takes Roots, have with the climate justice movements in the Global South.
Hey, Don, you want to just read out all the questions, and then maybe the rest of us, people who want to tap in, can...
Well, Cindy, given that we're at time, I want to let you answer the international question next, and then I'm going to let Shah tell me if we should continue to take a third question. I'm not sure that we have time for a third question. And then, so anyway, so I think you should do the international question, and Shah, in the meantime, you should cue me about what to do, so.
All right, folks. So in terms of the question around our connections to the international social movement, so I would say IAN can also answer this, and CJA as well in particular. All of us, and Right to the City actually, all of us have connections and have been doing international work with international social movements. But I think that one of the pieces is that has been important is that there is a global right-wing shift happening. And there is also an urgent and growing need to actually think about what are strategies that are actually going to beat back both the corporations, but also these global mechanisms, like in spaces like the UN, the WTO, the G20. And so folks have been mobilizing. You know, there's going to be a G20 meeting in July in Germany. There's going to be a WTO mobilization at the end of the year in Argentina. The climate negotiations just had a meeting in Bonn, and then they're reconvening in November. And so our organizations, and specifically, have also been trying to bridge and key lessons, share lessons about what do different movements internationally, what have they been doing in the context of right-wing, you know, regimes and context, but then also how do people reorient and organize. And then I think that part of what's happening is a regroupment that's been happening. So for example, at the same time as the People's Climate mobilization in Peru, there was people from Latin America and the Caribbean that came together in a pan-Amazonic social forum, and they invited us to speak via Zoom to share what was happening in the U.S. And there's a very direct tie, the ripple effects of Trumpism and U.S. foreign policies. We all very well much know that the deep impact, the deep capacity of the U.S.'s decisions having adverse impact on people in questions of sovereignty, water, war, all of those things. And so I think that part of what I think we're trying to really do is be able to connect and be deliberate about what that means. You know, there's rumors that, you know, the U.S. may back out of the Paris Agreement. We know that the Paris Agreement wasn't sufficient, but at least it had some level of accountability. And having the U.S. back out of that, I think we need to be able to have that response, because I think what that means globally. And so I'll pause there and let anyone else sort of pipe in.
Cool. Anyone else wants to quickly add to that question about the international work? If not, I would like to take Laura's question. So actually, Laura, while people are thinking, you should do that. And then just a note to the speakers, after we take Laura's question, we're going to start hearing the kind of closing comments from all of our speakers. So folks, get your comments ready. So Laura.
So actually, my first question is,
it was great listening to your laying out the needs at the different levels to really resource what we need to do, both to defend and advance. And I'm incredibly inspired to see what is underway. And I wonder, and maybe this is not an answer you can provide right now, but I wonder, is there a way to put together, like, what does that really look like? Like, what is the national need to do what it's doing? What do the different alliances need to be strong? What are the different member groups? And can we, like, have some kind of an aspirational budget that says, if we're really going to make change in this country over long term, this is what it's going to take. And then maybe as funders, we can start to look at how do we coordinate ourselves and what pieces of that can some of us start to work on and organize around.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And folks on Zoom, there's some head nodding going on in the room. So folks should know, some of you this is the second funder briefing that It Takes Roots has done, and some of you were at the first, and then some of you have been receiving communication from us. In the first 100-day phase, we did put out a budget, partly aspirational in that we ended up not entirely raising all of it, so it was slightly aspirational, but I think we are going to be doing that in the next period. So yeah, so Laura, I think we can share that in the days and weeks ahead. And for those of you who are interested in receiving it, please let us know. So I think the short answer is yes to that question. So on that note, what I want to do is I want to invite the speakers to kind of close us out a little bit, and I'm gonna kind of call your names like two at a time, like we're at City Council. Don't forget, comrades, 2 minutes. All right, so we're gonna start in order. We're gonna hear first from Huey and Claude, then followed by Candy and Sharon, and then Melissa and Angela, and then Cindy. Okay, so Huey and Claude. Huey, if you want to kick us off, and then we'll go to Claude next.
Yeah, I would just share as in closing that these four alliances have both the experience, the vision, and the relationships to really carry off a visionary approach and strategy. And that's why OPAL Environmental Justice has been super blessed to be able to be part of the Grassroots Global Justice in such a short time. We're committed on a local level to build out the grassroots frontline communities' power needed to amplify what is the strategy given on a national level. We're super excited to be part of that visionary work. It's a big lift, but it's something that isn't just something we've been working on in this past year, right? It's not just the 100 days. It was something we've been working on for decades. So we want to honor those that have come before us, and this is something we're committed to for the long haul. Super blessed to be part of this space.
Thank you, Claude.
Yeah, just want to echo a lot of what Hugh already mentioned, but looking for an IVAW and just understanding how militarism is so closely linked to extraction, and how being able to connect with our communities is so important. Even having our members who have been able to do work down south, like Ramon Mejia, work around moss protection that go on there, just to be able to expand our skills and and be able to connect with the groups that are doing the visionary work that's needed, and that Candy had mentioned, like we really want to help to be part of the qualitative change that is being called for right now, and just to really be part of this resistance hubs and see the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Claude. Candy?
Hello. So we talk a lot about the things that we don't want, which is great. We need to figure that out, but I think we're there. And so I think that what we really need is that help to what we do want and what we do see, and that push for that just transition work. And that piece requires us to be able to still meet and still gather together and collaborate, as a national, but have those tools that we go back home with. It really is that grassroots level that we need to build up all along the way with what we're doing collectively and what that looks like. And there are tools, there's things out there. There's Tesla has these little panels that we can put on our roofs and have solar roofs, and we have community gardens that we can have in our communities, whether that's a community in North Dakota or a block in a city. Again, it's the resources to be able to put that into our grassroots work at home, but still be able to leave and go collaborate with each other, because there's nothing like the power of visiting. There's nothing like sitting down with somebody face to face. Even this is cool, but some things can get lost in translation. And I would invite any of the funders, come on out to our communities and see what it is that we're building. I've invited different folks to North Dakota, for example, in August, the second weekend in August. We're doing our water ceremony and healing walk, and I'm going to do a tour of the Bakken Shale and show people what we live with on a daily basis. That's what I mean by qualitative building too. It's not just numbers and spreadsheets and written down on paper. It's that storytelling that comes along with our life, And so that's what I would see, and that's what I would ask, is just to invite people to, if you can, come to a couple of the different spaces where we are and see how we kind of take care of ourselves and each other. Because the way we do that, the way we take care of each other, is by lifting each other up when we see each other, and hugging each other when we're in a room together, and doing yoga on the beach at 6:30 in the morning, whatever works for people. But home is so important too. We have to be able to be in all these places all the time, and it just makes it a lot harder when we have bills to pay too.
Thanks, Candy. Hand it over to Sharon.
Yeah, so I think we've been able to demonstrate and show, the power of our alliances coming together and what we're able to do and what we're willing and hoping to do. Direct action is not something that's new to any of our communities, right? It's something we've been engaging in and practicing for a long time. And as was said, our communities are asking for continued capacity building and continued development. And It Takes Roots, I think, is really about creating the space and setting the stage for people to step into their leadership in all kinds of different ways. And so, I think what you're going to see from us is actions that are smarter, that are more strategic, that are bolder, and that see us leveraging our risk in really powerful and important ways. So I think we've got some really exciting things coming up.
Great. Thank you, Sharon. And for those of you who can't see, I'm so sad because Candy's daughter is sitting there on her lap playing with her toy cow. So you're missing a lot. Hi. All right. So on that note, Melissa, you're next, and then followed by Angela, and Cindy's going to wrap us up. So go ahead, Melissa.
Hey, Melissa, my dear, we can't hear you.
That time it wasn't my fault. Go ahead. Yeah, so so many of the sentiments have already been stated, but as a grassroots level organizer, I just have to echo that without the resource, it's kind of, as much as we need to be having these national conversations that are, around intersectionality and all of the issues, it's a tough call to make when we need to be on the ground and we're not resourced to do this type of national work. So, I just really feel like communities like mine with so many issues will suffer unless we're able to continue these kind of alliances moving forward. And for that, we do need, the resources.
Thank you, Melissa. Angela.
Hi, yes. So, yes, two things I'd like to leave this conversation with. One is, my hope that we were able to convey the level of trust, the level of inspiration that It Takes Roots has built up in the number of communities that we've been present, and the capacity to be able to do that in more communities. The other piece is something I think that I leave the funders with, which is, you know, as much as work as we've done as grassroots to try to influence philanthropy, because grassroots funding continues to be historically underfunded when you compare it to the overall environmental funding, is, you know, we need to continue to see and feel inspired by the work of the grassroots, but the resources need to match that inspiration, and we have to continue to pressure to be able to then work together on increasing the level of funding overall for grassroots. And I think It Takes Roots is an example of that, more so when we see that, you know, groups that have historically been funded continue to increase their funding, while groups who are very much rooted in the grassroots, very much responding to community needs and addressing systemic, structural, and institutional racism, discrimination, are the ones who are going to be building the solutions, the ones that we know are going to be holding the answers. And so my takeaway for today, and I'm hoping you all take this with you, is what we're trying to do on this call, what we're trying to do with It Takes Roots, is find the solutions, not for just 2018, not just for 2020, but really solutions that are long lasting. And I hope you join us on that with us.
And friends, you know, I think that what I'm most excited about is actually the hundreds and thousands of kitchen tables around this country, right? That where people are actually strategizing, are cross movement building, and are doing things in ways that I think are meeting the challenge of this moment, but also are very clear that there's so much more that we have to do. And I think that despite what happens, if Trump gets impeached, if Pence gets impeached, if whatever happens, I think that we're very clear, yes, crossing our fingers, he's digging his own grave. But whatever it is, I think we're very clear that despite whatever happens in this sort of like, in this political moment, that we need to keep building the creative capacity, the campaigns that you're seeing, expanding and contesting the political terrain. And I think we're ready to be. And I think what this taught us is that we brought our small staffed alliances together and created a team, and we brought in contractors and we brought in extra support, and what we were able to accomplish was so much on very little shared resources. And I think that if we were, I think Laura, your question, if we were to fund the ecosystem to the level that it needed to, it's like what's possible is even more, right? And I think that that's the lesson. It's like we're getting ready to be bold and ambitious, and we want you to accompany us in being bold and ambitious. And what that means is really resourcing the local work, because without that, we're clear, we're not anything without that local work. The regional strategies that we're going to experiment with in this next year, the national work, and then the work of even doing this, like, because we have found out that we need also infrastructure to do the work of It Takes Roots. And so I think, and to do the work of building with our other sisters and brothers, like the movement Beyond the Moment and the Mi Gente folks and Freedom Cities and all the amazing resistant work that's happening. And so I think that that's what we leave you with, is that this work is going to keep growing. This work is going to keep manifesting itself. And then I think that we're very honored and happy that, one, just an appreciation to all the folks that came on to speak, but also to Compton Foundation for hosting us in San Francisco, and then all of you friends and allies, funder friends and allies, and that have come to listen to what we've been up to and what we're thinking about next.
Great, thank you, Cindy. So we're at time. I want to thank everybody who's here in the room with us and everybody who's on the phone. I want to say the last thing I would add, a lot's been said, but I want to encourage our friends in philanthropy. I mean, I think the thing about this political moment is that we are all called on to be organizers in this moment. You know, you all are a part of building this visionary opposition. We are clear about that. That is why we're investing the time and energy to have a staff meeting with all of you and to review the work plan and figure out how we're going to get this done. But you know, you all are called on at this moment, as folks have said, to kind of really help us achieve this vision. And your role is critical. And we are ready to lead. And with your support, I think, you know, we'd like to be able to do that. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your afternoon. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one.